Well, this is very embarrassing because Steve Breyer, Justice Breyer, is the speaker for this evening, and all this stuff about me, which my mother, who's about 89, just keeps writing these things, and I keep telling her, stop exaggerating, but you know how mothers are. It's a great pleasure and a special privilege to be talking just for a couple of minutes to this marvelous gathering of this very important organization, and particularly to be introducing one of the ablest and most distinguished and far-sighted jurists on a closely divided Supreme Court that, for better or worse, finds itself now, as it has so often, in the cockpit of history and in a position to make an enormous impact for good or ill, both by what it does and just as often by what it does not do. Now, although as Justice Breyer, the 108th Supreme Court justice in our history, will undoubtedly confirm, although the members of his court are enormously civil to one another, the intellectual and philosophical battle lines have rarely been drawn more sharply across a broad array of truly fundamental issues. Playing the role that he seems to relish in that battle, Justice Scalia told a William and Mary audience of some 700 this March that there were all sorts of, to quote him, horrible conservative things that I'd like to do to society, like punishing bearded, sandal-wearing weirdos who burn the flag, he said. But, he said, my hands are tied. He told the half-disappointed audience, my hands are tied by the script laid down by the Founding Fathers. It was that script, strictly construed, that he said kept him and his band of beleaguered true believers from becoming drunk with the power that comes with sipping from the well of the enormously seductive, he said, living Constitution. Now, a year ago, in a blistering dissent in Lawrence v. Texas, Justice Scalia had taken dead aim at those of his colleagues whom he numbered among the too easily seduced. I think he had long since given up on John Paul Stevens and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and his fellow Harvard Law School alumnus, David Souter, but how could sensible Stanford graduates like Sandra Day O'Connor, Stanford Law School alumna, and Steve Breyer, a Stanford College alumnus, even though, to be sure, also a Harvard Law School alumnus and a former Harvard Law School professor, which might account for it, how could they have been seduced by those sirens of the living Constitution? Hadn't O'Connor voted, after all, with the majority in Bowers v. Hardwick just 18 years earlier? Well, he said that the decision to overrule Bowers, the decision which stunned him to cite the European Court of Human Rights, just had to be the result of following foreign fads and fashions. It must be Steve Breyer's English connections, the fact that he'd gone to Oxford, the fact that he goes to Yale occasionally for these global constitutionalism seminars with all of those foreign high court justices, all of whom seem to have captivated Sandra Day O'Connor. It must be all of that pulled them to the dark side, to join the gay rights contingent in the culture wars. Nothing else could explain it. Well, I dwell on that, obviously overdrawn charge, not to pick a fight with Justice Scalia, although I don't mind doing that. I do it from time to time. I like him. I admire him. My point is to make clear what bloodlust from the truly extreme right caricatures like Justice Scalia's unleash, though this may not be his intention. I looked at a fairly typical website just after the decision in Lawrence, discussing Justice Scalia's point about how it was the allure of foreign law that somehow had misled his colleagues. It's a website called freerepublic.com. And if you looked at it, you would have found people calling at the very least for the impeachment and removal of Justices Breyer and O'Connor, followed by their trial for treason. the debate seemed not to be over whether they had done anything wrong, but whether impeachment and conviction was enough. There were those who thought they should be tarred and feathered. There were opinions expressed that these, quote, living Constitution people are the death of the Republic. Somebody said the plot is to get Breyer promoted to Chief Justice and to bring Bill Clinton back as UN ambassador. If that happens, this sage said, you can be damn sure the time of the Antichrist will have begun. Somebody else said, it's time we clean that snake pit out. Well, not quite ready to go that far, Kentucky Representative Ron Lewis introduced H.R. 3920, the Congressional Accountability for Judicial Activism Act of 2004, which would authorize Congress by a two-thirds vote to overturn any decision of Justice Breyer's court. But not to worry, it was going to apply only to judgments made after its effective date. Now, today, that may seem like a fringe view, but I do think that we can all foresee political developments in this nation's future that could move the center so far to the right that today's fringe could become tomorrow's new normal. Movements in which the court itself could move rightward far enough to satisfy Mr. Lewis so that H.R. 3920 would no longer be needed. Now, what makes Justice Breyer especially dangerous to those who would applaud such rightward drift isn't just that he's incredibly smart and well-read, although he is certainly that. Steve Breyer's brilliance and erudition are second to none in the Supreme Court's modern history. What makes him especially dangerous is that he represents a triple threat. First of all, cutting the ground out from under the charge of imperious, anti-majoritarian elitism, Justice Breyer is a genuine Democrat with a small d, and I'll say just a little bit more about that in a second. Second, cutting the heart out of the simplistic argument that textual literalism and originalism and historic tradition, whatever their vices, at least have the virtue of shielding jurists from subjectivity and protecting society from willful judges. Cutting the heart out from that argument, Justice Breyer is, in addition to his rather busy position on the court, busily delivering public lectures and publishing impressive tomes, establishing, whether one agrees or not with all of its details, establishing in compelling terms that lay audiences could understand, that the other side's emperor of objectivity and certainty has no clothes. And third, Justice Breyer has both the ambition and the ability to speak across ideological and partisan lines, to build coalitions that stand for a more pragmatic and humane jurisprudence. Serious and straight to the point when the occasion demands, humorous and indirect when he needs to be, Justice Breyer is a force to be reckoned with.